Hey everyone, you're watching Ready Set Drone, and today I'm going to do a comparison of the DJI Spark with the DJI Mavic and give you some advice on which one you should buy if you're looking for a drone like this, so stay tuned. So since the DJI Spark came out a couple of months ago, there have been a lot of questions in the comments of this channel about should I buy a Spark or should I buy a Mavic? Today I'm going to try and help you make that decision based on some criteria and some comparisons that I want to share. First of all, I want to talk about the similarities between these two drones. Number one, they are both made by DJI, and I'm sure most of you know that, but maybe some newer folks who are just getting into drones aren't familiar with DJI. DJI is the largest manufacturer of consumer drones in the world. They own like 70% of the market share, and that's because they make really good drones. They are both very well made. They're both full of technology. They both have very similar transmitters as far as their radios go. The Mavic one does have a few advantages in terms of an LCD screen, whereas the Spark does not, but the transmitters look and feel very similar. So if you're flying one or the other, it's a very easy transition between the two. They both use the DJI Go 4 app, which is something that DJI recently forked from their original DJI Go app. The 4 now only supports the latest drones like the Mavic and the Spark and the Phantom 4 and the Phantom 4 Pro, and it's a pretty stable, intuitive, and very rich feature set app. So if you're using it, there's lots of stuff you can do with it on both of these drones. They both can be flown with your phone using the DJI Go 4 app, meaning that you don't necessarily have to have the transmitter or remote control to fly this one or this one. A lot of people know that about the Spark. A lot of people may not be familiar with that about the Mavic. The Mavic has a switch on the side that switches it from transmitter to Wi-Fi. The Spark basically emits a Wi-Fi signal by default until you pair it with a transmitter, and then it stops emitting that signal. But if you want to switch it back, there's a way to do it. So you can fly either of them with a phone/tablet or with a standard transmitter. I recommend flying with the transmitter because it's a way better experience than flying with the phone, but that's another story. They both have a mechanical gimbal for image stabilization, although the Sparks, it's a 2-axis, and the Mavics is a 3-axis, and I'll get into more about that later. But they both take really stable images. There are some limitations to the Spark in terms of the stabilization, but the overall message is if you're used to flying a drone without a gimbal, these are a huge leap forward. Both of them are from that. They both have a sport mode, which allows them to fly really fast and pretty agilely. So if you want to have some fun just flying around and really get after it with some speed, the sport mode is great. Also, both have intelligent flight modes that allow you to do things like tracking, like spirals, like circles. Lots of things you can do with the intelligent flight modes that you can't do with other drones. Those intelligent flight modes are designed to enhance the way you fly. And they take a little bit of learning, but once you learn how to do them, boy, they can really do some cool things with them, and they both have those. They both have really similar camera sensors and fields of view. I believe that the Mavic's camera sensor is slightly bigger. It's like 12 point something, whereas the Spark's camera sensor is 12 point something less. So they're both very similar, very slightly bigger camera sensor in the Mavic, and also the field of view in the Mavic I believe is slightly wider than the field of view in the Spark. Not by much though. They're very similar cameras in terms of the megapixels and the field of view. They both use GPS and GLONASS, which is the, I believe, Russian system for satellite acquisition and for being able to position themselves. And they both position themselves in place really, really well. I would say that the Mavic does latch on to satellites a bit quicker and seems to be a little bit more stable, but the Spark is not far behind in terms of how it uses GPS positioning. So that's a similarity between them. They both work with the DJI goggles, although the Mavic works with the goggles in wireless capacity, where you don't have to plug anything into your remote control in order to use the goggles. The Spark requires you to plug in, and I'll talk a bit more about that. The performance in the goggles is definitely better with the Mavic, but they both do work with the goggles. So if you want to fly FPV with the Spark, you can absolutely do it, and it's a pretty cool experience. And of course, they are both very, very portable. Now I've got them sitting out here with the Mavic unfolded and the Spark in its only position it has because it doesn't have folding arms. I do want to go ahead and fold up the Mavic real quick, and I'll show you kind of how small it gets if you haven't already seen this. So, you know, when you fold down the Mavic, they're actually a pretty similar size. The Mavic is even now slightly bigger, slightly taller, not quite as wide, but a little bit longer. So, you know, as far as their size goes, when you fold it down, they're pretty competitive. But when you're actually flying the Mavic and you've got the arms all folded out, it's quite a bit bigger. And why is that important? Well, that gives you some advantages and some disadvantages, which I'm going to cover in the next part of this video. I'm going to start with the Spark, the David to this Goliath, although it's much smaller than a Goliath. The Spark has some very distinct advantages as far as the way it's built and what it can do for you. First of all is the price. The Spark is $699 US for the Fly More package. Now that $699 includes the remote control, a case, prop guards, and an extra battery, and the charger, of course. That means that basically for $699, you're getting an extra battery, whereas the Mavic is $999 or $1,000 basically for one battery. And the remote control, you don't really get a case with the Mavic per se. It comes in more of a box, so you have to find something else to carry the Mavic in. But you do get one battery, and the batteries themselves are around $89, $90. The Spark battery is a little bit less, I think around $69. So, you know, if you're going to buy a spare set of batteries, you're going to get a better deal, or it's going to be cheaper to buy them with the Spark than it is with the Mavic. So keep that in mind. Batteries are one of those things that you want to have a lot of, and you get two with the Fly More pack, whereas you get one with the standard Mavic Pro setup. The next thing is a small size. I mean, just take a look at these two. The Mavic is very small at 335 millimeters diagonally from motor to motor. That's when the arms are extended. But the Spark is tiny at 170 millimeters diagonally. I mean, it's, you know, it is literally half the size, a little bit more than half the size of the Mavic. The Mavic was always kind of considered a very small quad with all these capabilities that it has, but the Spark just kind of blows that away. And so if you're looking for something that's small, unintimidating, easy to carry around, the Spark is a great choice because it is so small and because people look at it and go, oh, how cute, not, oh, you've got a drone, trouble. But the Mavic is still can be folded down, and because it can be folded down and carried in the folded position, it does give you that flexibility to carry it with you as well. Now, the weight of the Mavic is quite a bit more than the weight of the Spark. The Spark is 300 grams, the Mavic is 730 grams. So, you know, more than twice as much in terms of weight. The Spark also comes in 5 different colors, whereas the Mavic comes in gray. So if you're interested in sort of expressing yourself through different colors, you've got red, blue, green, yellow, and white, I believe. And they're all really cool colors. This is the lava red, and I like this color a lot. So that's one thing that if you're more of a style person, having a different colored drone might be something that sets you apart from everybody else. Whereas if you own a Mavic, you can buy skins for it, and you can put stickers on it and do all kinds of stuff. So you can always customize it that way. But the Spark itself comes in 5 different colors, whereas the Mavic comes in 1. And then there's the gesture control. Now the Spark has a variety of gesture controls you can do. You can have it come towards you, you can have it go away from you, you can have it follow your hand, you can have it take selfies, you can land it in your hand, you can take it off from your hand. You can do a lot of things without the remote control that are pretty cool. I know people might think that's a gimmick, but honestly I've done this quite a bit with the gesture control on the Spark, and it's pretty cool. People are always just amazed by it. You look like a Jedi when you're using your hand to move it left, right, up and down. The Mavic, I believe, does have the ability to do selfies with your hand gesture. I think. I remember this from the launch. I've never actually done it, so I don't know for sure. But the gesture control is not something that Mavic's known for. It's not something that's really promoted within the Mavic. And so if you want to do gesture control, the Spark is the way to go. And then finally, a big thing for me is that the Spark comes with a triple battery charger. So you can actually charge 3 batteries at the same time versus 1 with the charger that the Mavic comes with. And what's even cooler is the triple charger is not a sequential charger. It charges all 3 at once. So when you plug all 3 in 2 hours, you're going to have 3 full batteries versus 1 in 2 hours, 2 in 4 hours, and 3 in 6 hours. The Mavic does not come with a triple charger. I think it should, but it's really nice because the Spark actually has a shorter battery life, and so you're going to be charging batteries more often, so it's good that it comes with a triple charger. So those are my sort of advantages for the Spark. Now let's talk for a minute about the advantages of the Mavic. Now the Mavic's flight time is much longer than the Spark's. It can stay in the air for close to 20 minutes, 17, 18 minutes. The Spark can stay in the air for about 12 minutes until it reaches 20% battery capacity. Now I know that in the literature they tell you, it'll fly for this amount, but that is A, in ideal conditions, and B, that's flying your battery all the way down to 0. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about flying your battery down to 20-25% capacity, which is as far as you want to go with a LiPo battery without doing any damage to it. So 16, 17 minutes, 11, 12 minutes is what practical flight time you're going to get out of these two. So keep that in mind. You'll get this guy up in the air. You can keep it up in the air for 25% longer than you can this one. The next thing is the max range. You can go 7 kilometers or 4.3 miles with the Mavic, where you can go 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles with the Spark. That is a pretty big difference. I'm not a big fan of flying my quad way out of range when I can't see it or whatever, but it's nice to know that you have that range. And so having that distance that you can go with a very clear video signal through the OcuSync. By the way, the Mavic uses a technology called OcuSync for its video transmission, and the Spark does not. The Spark uses Wi-Fi. The Mavic goes 40 miles an hour in sport mode, which is really, really fast when you're flying a quad. The Spark does 31 miles per hour, which is also really fast. And quite honestly, that's an advantage to the Mavic, but I don't see it as a big one because to me, the Spark is small and it feels like it's going even faster because of its size. So if you want to fly in sport mode, the Mavic's going to be a little bit faster, but the Spark can compete, but it's a little bit of an advantage to the Mavic. Now, one of the biggest advantages the Mavic has over the Spark is the 3-axis gimbal, which is what stabilizes the camera. It stabilizes the pitch, stabilizes the roll, and it stabilizes the yaw. So when you're flying and you're yawing and you're pitching and you're rolling, this camera stays rock steady. So when you're starting to use the yaw on this Spark as you're flying along, you're going to see a little bit of abruptness with the way that the transitions happen. You can do a smooth yaw with this gimbal and with this quad. It just takes a little more effort, a little more practice flying really slowly. Whereas with the Mavic, you can fly pretty quickly and rotate, and you're going to get a really smooth shot every time. And of course, the other big factor is that the Mavic has a 4K camera that can shoot at higher frame rates, up to 96 frames per second in 1080, whereas the Spark only does 1080, can't do 4K, and it can only do 30 frames per second in 1080. Now, why is frames per second important? It's because it allows you to do really smooth slow-mo shots. If you want to do some sort of dramatic reveal and you want to put it in slow motion, having higher frame rate is going to make it look a lot better. 96 frames a second is more than 3 times 30, so you're going to be able to slow it down 3 times without any degradation. It's going to look really smooth. But for most things, 30 frames per second at 1080 looks pretty good. And it's one of those things where it sort of takes you 80% of the way, and that last 20% is what 4K and higher frame rates give you. But if you need that last 20%, then of course it's important to go ahead and get something that does it. So the win for the Mavic in terms of frame rate and screen resolution at 4K. As I mentioned earlier, they both work with the DJI goggles. They're both amazing to fly with the DJI goggles. The The only issue I really had was with the Spark. Even when I plugged it in using the OTG cable, which I explained in the Spark review video, you still get a little bit of pixelation and dropout on the goggles that you don't get in the Mavic. The Mavic with the goggles is like butter. It's just smooth. The OcuSync works perfectly. You don't have to plug anything in. It's all done wirelessly. And so if you're going to fly with the DJI goggles, the Mavic has a big advantage. You can do it with the Spark, and it's a pretty good experience, but again, it has to do with the range and the speed at which you're flying. When you fly really fast and you fly far away with the Spark, you'll find more dropout, more pixelation, because it's trying to refresh that screen over what must be a slower connection or a lower resolution connection than the OcuSync. The OcuSync, you can fly really fast, you can fly really far, and it just looks super smooth. So advantage to the Mavic in terms of using the DJI goggles, but again, the Spark does work with the goggles, and it's not a bad experience. It's just not quite as good as with the Mavic. And then finally, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned earlier, the Mavic's transmitter has a built-in LCD screen, whereas the Spark's does not. They both hold your phone or tablet in a little pair of little arms that come down and plug into the remote. And they both do a good job of that. However, I found that if you want to fly without a phone or a tablet, the Mavic is a little bit better because it has that LCD screen with all the information about distance, height, your battery levels, etc., that the Spark's remote doesn't carry. So you're going to kind of need to always have your phone plugged in if you want to fly the Spark. You can do it without your phone. It just isn't going to give you that same amount of data that you will get if you're using your phone. Whereas with the Mavic, if you don't want to use your phone, you can get a lot of that data using just the LCD screen built into the Mavic's transmitter. Okay, so I just went through all the advantages of the Spark and the Mavic, and you can see there's quite a few of them in both camps. But what I really want to tell you is this isn't a black and white, this one's better kind of thing. It really has to do with what you want to do, what your experience level is, what you want to spend, etc. So I will tell you that they're just very different quads. I would consider the Spark to be a little bit more casual and fun. It's what some people call a selfie drone, and it's for taking pictures of yourself, posting to social media, having fun with your family, letting your kids fly it. It's very unintimidating, so you know, flying it with people who might be a little bit intimidated by drones. Whereas the Mavic can do a lot of those things, but it's also a bit more professional and a bit more intimidating and a bit bigger and a little more ominous looking, quite honestly. It's not as cute as the Spark. So coming down to whether you should buy the Spark or the Mavic, here's my advice. If you are a new quadcopter flyer or just getting into your first non-toy quadcopter and just want something to have some fun with it, to learn how to fly, and to just upgrade from a toy quadcopter to something with some serious features, I'd go with the Spark. It's a great deal. You get 2 batteries for $700. You can also buy additional Sparks and pair them with your one Spark remote control. So you could have 3 or 4 Sparks that are all paired to the same remote. And that way you could just spend $500 on each of those additional Sparks versus $700 if you wanted to for some reason. But what I'm saying is this is a great first non-toy drone, more advanced drone, and it will do great video for you. It'll do great pictures for you. It's a ton of fun to fly. It's a pretty easy learning curve. So I'd say if that's your case, if you're someone who's just wanting to get into more advanced drones, go with the Spark. But if you're someone who uses a drone for professional video, you do weddings, you do real estate, you do corporate video, you do filmmaking, any of that kind of stuff, the Mavic is really kind of the entry point for that sort of thing. I honestly would say that the Mavic is probably not quite as professional as you need to be if you're going to be doing real professional video. Phantom 4 Pro and Inspire, something like that might be more literally professional. But you could show up on set with this and you could get some really good shots, whether you're shooting 4K or 1080. It has an amazing camera as long as there's enough light. It has an amazing gimbal, keeps the shots very steady. And so if it's something that you're more serious about getting photos and video, this is the way to go versus the Spark. The Spark is, again, limited to 1080 and 30 frames. So that by itself kind of eliminates you if you want to shoot on anything higher than that. And also the Mavic is still super portable. While it weighs more and it's a little bit bigger, you can still stick it in your backpack and take it with you just about anywhere. I really enjoy both of these quads. They're a ton of fun to fly. I've been flying the Spark a lot, been doing a lot of videos about it, etc. But I am taking a trip in about 2 weeks to Norway, and I'm taking the Mavic. I'm not taking the Spark, I'm taking the Mavic. Why am I taking the Mavic? Better quality video, higher frame rates, and honestly longer flight times. I want to be able to get this guy in the air, position myself, and fly for closer to 16, 18 minutes and not have to land after 11 or 12 like I would with the Spark. So does that mean I like the Mavic better? Not necessarily. It just depends on what I'm doing that day. I've been, as I said, flying the Spark a lot lately, but I feel like the Mavic for me is going to be a great travel companion and something I can document my trip with, which, by the way, I should have some cool video from that in about a month. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped bring some clarity to the decision between buying a Spark or a Mavic. I know it's not like just do this, do this. There's a lot of factors to consider, but at least now you have a little bit more knowledge about that. Of course, I would love for you to like this video, and of course I would love for you to follow Ready Set Drone and continue to subscribe and leave comments below. It's the community that really makes this a great channel. So thank you to everyone that watches, and we will see you next time on Ready Set Drone.